The mighty Galactic Empire, a massive organization that controlled many worlds and held the galaxy in its grip, was famous for its power. The Empire's starships, their weapons, and their warriors were unmatched. No enemy had ever managed to break through their defenses. For centuries, the Empire was unchallenged, ruling over star systems with an iron fist. Yet, as the Empire's flagship, the Star Fortress, drifted through the vast emptiness of space, a strange occurrence began to unfold. On the command deck of the Star Fortress, Captain William O'Connell, an experienced officer with over 30 years of service, stood watching the stars through the window. He had been through many battles, many encounters, but this felt different. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Emma Harris, was busy at her station, her fingers moving swiftly over the controls. A soft beeping interrupted the stillness. Emma looked up, her face tense. "Captain, I'm getting an odd report," she said, her voice steady but uncertain. "There's an unidentified vessel heading directly for us." O'Connell frowned. He had seen many strange things in his time, but this didn't sit right. The Star Fortress was the most advanced warship in the Empire, and nothing should be able to sneak up on them. "Do we have any idea who or what it is?" he asked. Emma shook her head. "No, sir. The vessel isn't showing up in any of our databases. It's not on the registry." O'Connell paced slowly across the deck, thinking, how can that be? Every ship, every vessel in the galaxy should be accounted for. As the ship's sensors continued to search, nothing appeared. The strange vessel was closing in on them, and no one could understand how. O'Connell had always trusted his sensors, and yet now they were failing him. The silence in the room grew, thick with tension. A second beeping interrupted the silence. Emma glanced at the screen again, her expression darkening. "Captain, I'm trying to get a lock on the vessel, but there's something wrong. It's not even there. I can't trace it." "Possible," O'Connell muttered under his breath. "We have the best technology in the galaxy. How could something get this close without us noticing?" He turned to Emma. "Keep trying. I want answers. We need to know who or what this is." Emma nodded and worked faster. Meanwhile, O'Connell stepped to the side, staring out the viewport. His mind raced with possibilities. Could this be a rogue ship? A pirate vessel? Or was it something worse? Something more dangerous than they could imagine? Time ticked by slowly, the silence on the deck broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines. The mysterious vessel continued to draw closer, and O'Connell felt a growing unease. He had always trusted the Empire's defenses, but now, for the first time, felt vulnerable. Just as he was about to speak, Emma's voice cut through the air again. "Sir, I've found something. The vessel is coming closer. It seems to be hiding itself somehow. I'm not sure how, but our sensors are barely able to pick it up." O'Connell's eyes narrowed. "This is no simple malfunction. Keep working on it." Suddenly, the CUM system crackled to life. The voice that came through was distorted, but it was unmistakably human. "This is Captain Olivia Parker of the Arcadia. We are approaching your ship. Stand down and prepare for boarding." The room fell silent. O'Connell blinked in disbelief. "Arcadia? What kind of name is that? I've never heard of it." Emma quickly tapped a few keys on her console. "There's nothing, sir." "No records. Nothing about a ship named Arcadia, and no records of a Captain Olivia Parker?" The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. O'Connell couldn't believe it. A ship that didn't exist in any records. A captain no one knew? His thoughts swirled with confusion and suspicion. "This is Captain William O'Connell of the Star Fortress. You are in violation of Imperial space. Explain yourself immediately." There was a long pause, and then the same voice came through the CUM system again. "We are not here to cause harm, Captain O'Connell, but we are prepared to defend ourselves if necessary. You have been warned." O'Connell stood frozen for a moment. The voice was calm, but the words carried an unmistakable threat. "Defend ourselves?" he muttered to himself. This was not just another pirate or rogue ship. This was something else. Something dangerous? He turned to Emma, his mind racing. "What do you make of this?" "I don't know, sir," Emma replied, her voice tight. "But whatever this is, it's not normal." O'Connell stepped forward, trying to maintain control of the situation. He had been in the Empire's service long enough to know that when something seemed wrong, it usually was. "Prepare for anything," he said, his voice steady, but filled with concern. "This is no ordinary ship. We have to be ready for whatever comes next." The crew sprang into action, preparing the Star Fortress for whatever this strange vessel might throw at them. The Empire had faced many threats before, but this one felt different. O'Connell had no idea what was happening. But he knew one thing for sure. They were about to find out. As the mysterious ship drew nearer, O'Connell could feel his pulse quickening. Whatever was happening, it was not something the Empire was prepared for. And soon, they would learn just how unprepared they truly were. As the minutes passed, the tension aboard the Star Fortress grew thicker. The mysterious ship continued to approach with no sign of stopping. Captain William O'Connell stood at the command deck, his eyes fixed on the stars outside. He had faced countless threats over his career, but this felt different. It wasn't just the fact that the ship was unknown or unregistered. There was something more, something that tugged at his instincts. The crew, usually composed and focused, was on edge. Lieutenant Emma Harris worked tirelessly at her station, trying to piece together anything that could explain the situation. "I've tried everything, Captain," Emma said, her voice tight with frustration. "Nothing works. It's like the ship isn't even there. It's cloaked in a way we've never seen before." Connell nodded slowly. "How close is it now?" "About 5 minutes out," Emma replied. O'Connell turned to the rest of the crew. His orders were clear. "Prepare for anything. We need to be ready for anything," he said. "Weapons online, shields at maximum. The Empire does not back down." His words were firm, but the uncertainty in his voice was hard to hide. The crew moved swiftly, working with practiced precision to make the Star Fortress battle-ready. Despite their best efforts, the sense of unease only grew stronger. The ship had never faced an enemy like this before. O'Connell couldn't shake the feeling that this was no accident. Whoever was behind this, they knew exactly what they were doing. As the vessel drew closer, O'Connell kept his eyes on the approaching ship. There were no visible weapons or markings on the ship, nothing to indicate what kind of threat they were dealing with. Yet, there was a strange hum in the air, as if the entire ship was vibrating. It was subtle at first, but it quickly grew stronger, echoing through the metal walls of the Star Fortress. "What's that sound?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. O'Connell didn't reply at first. He didn't have an answer. The hum seemed to come from the approaching vessel, growing louder by the second. The crew was silent, listening to the strange sound that seemed to fill every corner of the ship. The air grew heavier, and the tension was almost unbearable. Finally, Emma spoke again. "Captain, I think we've been spotted." O'Connell's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Emma's fingers flew across her console, trying to make sense of the readings. "I'm seeing an energy surge coming from the unidentified ship. It's like it's charging up something." O'Connell's mind raced. A weapon? A trap? Whatever it wasn't good. "Get me a full scan of that ship," he ordered. Emma nodded and quickly initiated a new scan. The ship's sensors hummed in response. The tension on the bridge was thick as everyone waited for the results. After what felt like an eternity, Emma's voice cut through the silence. "Captain, it's not a weapon. I'm picking up strange energy readings. It looks like they're powering up something, but I can't tell what it is." O'Connell clenched his fists. Whatever this was, it was unlike anything they had encountered before. He turned to the rest of the crew. "Weapons are online, shields are at maximum. We'll need to be ready for anything. Prepare for the worst." As he said the words, he knew that the Star Fortress might not be enough to withstand whatever this strange vessel had in store. The unknown ship continued to approach, its strange hum filling the air. It was too close now. O'Connell could feel his heart racing. He needed to make a decision, and fast. He turned to Emma. "Prepare a course. We need to move. Get us away from this ship." Emma's fingers flew over her console as she plotted a course. But before she could complete the calculations, the comm system crackled to life again. The voice of Captain Olivia Parker echoed through the speakers, cold and calm as before. This is Captain Olivia Parker of the Arcadia. I told you to stand down. If you do not comply, we will be forced to take action." The words were simple, but they carried an undeniable weight. O'Connell clenched his jaw. He had heard this before, but this time it felt different. He didn't know why, but something in his gut told him that this wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. He turned to his crew. "Get ready for evasive maneuvers. We are not going down without a fight." His voice was steady, but his mind was racing. The Empire had never faced an enemy like this. He had never faced an enemy like this. Emma nodded and quickly began to plot a new course. The Star Fortress began to move, the great warship's engines rumbling to life. The ship veered away from the Arcadia, but it was clear that it wasn't going to be that easy. The Arcadia was following them, keeping pace with ease. O'Connell watched the readings as the two ships circled each other. There was a feeling of inevitability in the air, as if a battle was unavoidable. His instincts told him that the Arcadia was ready for a fight. The hum from the enemy vessel grew louder, almost deafening now. Emma's voice broke through the noise. "Captain, they're firing!" O'Connell's heart skipped a beat. The Arcadia's energy surge had been a prelude to an attack. He slammed his hand on the console. Evasive maneuvers now. The Star Fortress lurched as the crew scrambled to avoid the incoming fire. The first barrage of energy blasts hit the shields, sending shockwaves through the ship. The hull groaned under the pressure, but the shields held strong. For now, the crew worked quickly to return fire, but the Arcadia was fast, its movements unpredictable. O'Connell watched the readouts with growing concern. The Star Fortress was the most advanced warship the Empire had ever built. But it was clear that the Arcadia had technology beyond anything the Empire had ever seen. "We need to find a way to break their defenses," O'Connell muttered, his mind working at full speed. The Arcadia was a serious threat, but they couldn't afford to lose this fight. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. The battle had begun in earnest. And Captain O'Connell knew that this fight would determine the future of the Empire. The Star Fortress was ready for battle, but its true strength would be tested in ways it had never been before. The unknown enemy, the Arcadia, was unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. And O'Connell wasn't sure if they could survive this encounter. He only knew one thing for certain: this battle would change everything. The Star Fortress and the Arcadia were locked in a deadly game, and the galaxy's future hung in the balance. The battle between the Star Fortress and the Arcadia continued. The sounds of weapons, fire, and the hum of energy blasts filling the air. Captain William O'Connell gripped the edge of the command console, his eyes locked on the display as the two ships danced through space. Each time the Star Fortress fired, the Arcadia seemed to glide out of the way, moving with an eerie grace. It was as though the enemy ship could predict every move the Star Fortress made, anticipating its every maneuver. The Star Fortress wasn't a slow ship by any means, but compared to the Arcadia, it was like a giant lumbering through a field of lightning. O'Connell's mind raced. There had to be a way to break through the Arcadia's defenses. He knew the Star Fortress had superior firepower, but it wasn't enough to land a hit. The Arcadia was too fast, too precise. The crew worked tirelessly to return fire, but the enemy ship remained out of their reach. Each blast the Star Fortress fired seemed to be swallowed by the emptiness of space. O'Connell's frustration grew. He needed to do something, and fast. He glanced at Lieutenant Emma Harris. She was working furiously at her station, her face lit by the glow of the console. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she typed in commands, trying to adjust the ship's targeting systems. She had a determined look on her face, but O'Connell could see the strain in her eyes. She was doing everything she could, but it wasn't enough. They needed more. The Arcadia fired again, this time hitting the Star Fortress's outer hull. The blast sent a shockwave through the ship, rattling the crew. The lights dimmed, and the ship's warning alarms blared. O'Connell braced himself against the console, his mind working even faster. The Star Fortress was losing power, and it couldn't afford to take many more hits like that. "How much time until the shields go down?" he asked, his voice tight. "We've got about 5 minutes, sir," came the response from the ship's engineer. O'Connell cursed under his breath. 5 minutes wasn't nearly enough. The Arcadia was getting closer, and their shields were weakening with every blast. The Star Fortress was in trouble. But there was something about the Arcadia that didn't make sense. It was too perfect, too controlled. O'Connell had been in many battles, and he had learned to trust his instincts. His gut told him that there was something else going on here. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was something more, something bigger. He turned back to Harris. "What have you got?" he asked. Harris's eyes were locked on her console, her face tense with concentration. She looked up at O'Connell, her expression serious. "Captain, I'm picking up some unusual readings. The energy signatures are fluctuating in a way I've never seen before." It's almost like she stopped, her words trailing off. O'Connell leaned in. "Like what?" He pressed. "It's almost like they're using some kind of phase-shifting technology," she said slowly. "I've never seen anything like it. The ship's energy systems aren't just powering their weapons. It's like they're bending space around them." O'Connell's eyes widened. Phase-shifting technology? That was impossible. Or at least it should have been. The Empire had never developed anything like it. "Are you saying that they're—" "Yes, sir," Harris interrupted. "I think they're bending space itself to avoid our shots. That's why we can't land a hit." Connell's mind spun. This was bad. The Arcadia wasn't just advanced, it was on a whole new level. This was no longer just a battle of firepower. The Arcadia had technology that the Empire didn't even know existed. A ship that could manipulate space itself? That was something else entirely. O'Connell's jaw tightened. The Star Fortress had to hold. They couldn't let the Arcadia get away. Not with that kind of power. "We need to find a way to disable their phase-shifting tech," O'Connell said, his voice calm but full of determination. "If we don't, this fight is over." The crew worked quickly to come up with a solution, but time was running out. Another blast from the Arcadia hit the Star Fortress's shields, and this time the impact was stronger. The lights flickered again, and the ship groaned under the pressure. The crew held their breath, waiting for the shields to fail. "Shields are holding for now, Captain," the engineer reported, but O'Connell could hear the fear in his voice. They weren't going to last much longer. O'Connell turned to Harris. "What's the status on that scan?" Harris glanced at the console. "I'm getting something, Captain. There's a weak spot in their energy field. It's like a blind spot in their phase-shifting tech. If we hit it just right, we can disrupt the whole system." O'Connell's eyes sharpened. This was the break they needed. "Do we have a target?" he asked. Harris nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm locking onto it now." O'Connell turned to the crew. "Prepare for a direct hit. All power to forward weapons." The crew moved quickly, following their orders without hesitation. The Star Fortress shifted in space as it prepared for its next strike. O'Connell's hands tightened around the console as they took aim at the weak spot in the Arcadia's defenses. He held his breath as the targeting system locked in, and then, with one final command, the Star Fortress unleashed everything it had. The blast streaked through space, hitting the Arcadia dead on. For a moment, everything was silent. The two ships drifted, the hum of the Star Fortress's engines the only sound, and then the Arcadia shook. The phase-shifting technology faltered for the briefest moment, and O'Connell saw his chance. "Fire again!" he shouted. This time, the Star Fortress hit its target with a precision it hadn't been able to achieve before. The Arcadia's shields flickered, and the strange humming noise that had been present since the battle began suddenly stopped. The enemy ship was exposed. It was vulnerable. O'Connell's heart pounded in his chest as the Star Fortress fired once more. This was their moment. The Arcadia had been dealt a blow, and the tide of the battle had shifted. The Star Fortress had found its mark, and now it was time to press the advantage. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since the battle had begun, Captain O'Connell felt a spark of hope. The Empire had been tested, but now they were fighting back. And the Arcadia would learn that even the most advanced technology could be overcome with determination and willpower. The tide had turned, and Captain O'Connell wasn't going to let up. Not now, not ever. Captain O'Connell stared at the Arcadia as it drifted through space. The battle had shifted in their favor, But it wasn't over yet. The Star Fortress had landed a solid blow, but the enemy ship was still alive, still dangerous. The Arcadia was not going to back down. O'Connell knew this fight was far from finished. It wasn't just about firepower anymore. It wasn't even about skill. This was something else, something deeper. He turned to his crew. "Weapons? Status?" he asked. Lieutenant Harris looked up from her console. "We're low on energy, Captain. Shields are still holding, but we've used most of our reserves firing on the Arcadia. We can't keep up this pace much longer." O'Connell nodded. The Star Fortress had been built for long-term battles, but even it had its limits. The Arcadia, on the other hand, seemed almost limitless. Its ability to phase shift and avoid damage was beyond anything they had faced before. There was no way to beat it with sheer firepower alone, O'Connell thought back to what Harris had said earlier about the Arcadia's energy systems. Phase shifting. The concept was still mind-boggling. If the Arcadia could bend space to its will, then they were dealing with a level of technology that the Empire couldn't even comprehend. "We need to stop it," O'Connell said, his voice steady. "Harris, any ideas?" Harris's fingers danced across her console. "I'm working on it, Captain. I think we might be able to disrupt their energy flow if we target their central core. It's where all the power seems to be coming from. Can hit it hard enough, we might destabilize their phase-shifting tech." O'Connell's heart skipped a beat. A central core? That was their only shot. They could hit it just right. It could be the key to ending this battle. But the Arcadia was fast, and O'Connell knew that they wouldn't get many chances. They had to act quickly. "Can you pinpoint the location of the core?" he asked. "I'm working on it, sir," Harris replied. Her brow furrowed as she tapped commands into her console. The seconds seemed to stretch on forever. O'Connell's eyes darted back and forth across the bridge. The crew was on edge, but they were working with the kind of focus that only comes when survival is at stake. The seconds passed, then minutes. Time felt irrelevant as they focused on the task at hand. Finally, Harris looked up. "I've got a location, Captain. The central core is located at the rear of the ship, just behind their engines." O'Connell nodded. This was it. They had to make their move now, or they would lose their chance. Plot a course to target that location. All power to forward weapons. The Star Fortress moved forward, engines roaring to life. The crew scrambled to make sure everything was ready for the next strike. Harris's hands flew over her console, targeting the core with a precision that only she could achieve. "Target lock, Captain," she said. O'Connell's eyes narrowed. This was it. They had a chance to end this. The Arcadia was too far out of range to hit directly with their primary weapons, but the Star Fortress had secondary weapons that were still operational. "Prepare secondary weapons." "Get us in range of the core," O'Connell commanded. The Star Fortress surged forward, closing the distance between it and the Arcadia. The hum of the secondary weapons charging echoed across the bridge. O'Connell's grip tightened around the console. They couldn't afford to miss. The Arcadia moved in unpredictable patterns, trying to shake them off, but the Star Fortress kept its course. Harris's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, the target is in range." O'Connell didn't hesitate. "Fire." The Star Fortress unleashed its secondary weapons. The blast streaked across the void of space, a beam of pure energy aimed directly at the central core of the Arcadia. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The beam hit the Arcadia square on, and the ship shuddered violently. The hum of its phase-shifting technology flickered and sputtered. For the first time, O'Connell saw a crack in the Arcadia's perfect defenses. The ship's shields began to ripple, and the phase-shifting effect wavered. It was working. A last had hit the core, and the Arcadia's systems were beginning to destabilize. But it wasn't enough. The Arcadia wasn't down yet. Another blast from the enemy ship struck the Star Fortress's shields, rattling the crew again. The ship groaned under the strain. O'Connell gritted his teeth. Star Fortress couldn't take much more of this. They had to finish it. The Arcadia was vulnerable now, but there was something different about the enemy ship. The hum that had been present throughout the battle had stopped, but in its place, a deep, resonant thrum filled the air. Engines seemed to come alive, and O'Connell could see the ship shifting in space, its position becoming erratic and unpredictable. Harris looked up from her console. Captain, their systems are regenerating. Their core is still unstable, but they're charging something up. I think they're preparing for a counterattack. O'Connell's heart sank. He couldn't keep up with this. The Arcadia was too powerful, too advanced, but they couldn't give up now. They had one shot left. The Star Fortress was low on power, but they had to push forward. There was no other choice. We need to finish this, O'Connell said, his voice firm. Harris, what's our status on that core? It's weakening, Captain, but they're regenerating quickly. We need to hit it again now. O'Connell nodded. He had no time to waste. The Arcadia was charging its weapons. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about sheer determination. He turned to the crew. Prepare for the final strike. All power to forward weapons. We have one shot at this. The crew moved quickly, their every action filled with purpose. The Star Fortress surged forward once again. The Arcadia was closing in fast, its weapons charging, but it wasn't going to make it. The Star Fortress locked onto the core once more, and O'Connell's voice rang out across the bridge. Fire. The blast streaked across the stars, aimed directly at the heart of the Arcadia's power core. Time seemed to stand still as the beam made its way across space. Then, with a burst of light and sound, the beam hit its mark. The Arcadia's shields flickered once more, and then collapsed altogether. The deep, resonant thrum that had filled the air vanished in an instant. The Arcadia was vulnerable. This time, the Star Fortress didn't miss. A final, devastating barrage of firepower slammed into the Arcadia's now exposed core. The ship groaned, its systems flickering in and out of power. The Star Fortress fired again, and the Arcadia exploded in a brilliant flash of light. For a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then, the Star Fortress was left alone in the silence of space. Surrounded by the remnants of the Arcadia, O'Connell stood at the command console, his hands still gripping the controls. His heart was racing. The battle was over. They had won. But at what cost? The Star Fortress had been damaged beyond repair, and the crew had fought harder than ever before. It had been a battle like no other. But they had prevailed. The Empire had triumphed over an enemy unlike any they had ever faced before. O'Connell looked out into space, his mind racing. What was next? What else lay ahead in this galaxy that was growing darker by the day? He didn't have the answers, but he knew one thing. The battle had only just begun. The Star Fortress drifted through space, the remnants of the Arcadia still floating in the void. The battle had been won, but there was a lingering silence aboard the ship. The crew moved slowly, each member exhausted from the intense fight. Captain O'Connell stood at the front of the bridge, staring out into the cold emptiness of space. The fight with the Arcadia had pushed them to their limits. He knew that they had done something remarkable, but there was a weight on his shoulders. He couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was just the beginning. The Empire had defeated one of the most advanced ships they had ever encountered. But there were still countless unknowns in the galaxy. He turned to his crew. "Report," he said. Lieutenant Harris was the first to speak. "The Arcadia is destroyed, sir. All systems are offline, and the debris is beginning to disperse. We've successfully neutralized the threat for now." O'Connell nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The Arcadia had been powerful, too powerful. What else could be out there? What other ships, with technologies that the Empire had never seen, were out there, waiting? He walked over to the communications officer. "Have we been able to get a signal out?" The officer nodded. "Yes, sir. We've sent a distress signal to Imperial Command. They should be receiving our report soon." O'Connell felt a small relief. The Star Fortress had been in worse shape than he cared to admit, but at least they had managed to get a message out. He turned to Lieutenant Harris again. "How's the damage?" he asked. "The shields took heavy damage, and the engines are down to 40%, Harris reported. "We'll need to make repairs before we can get underway again." O'Connell let out a breath. It would take time to get the Star Fortress back to full working order. Time they didn't have. The galaxy was changing, and O'Connell knew they couldn't afford to stay idle for long. He turned toward the view screen. The debris of the Arcadia floated in the distance, but it was just another reminder of what they had faced, what they might face again. The silence on the bridge was broken by a voice. "Captain, We've received a transmission from Imperial Command. The communications officer's voice was steady, but O'Connell could hear the tension in it. Put it through, O'Connell ordered. The screen flickered, and soon an image of an officer appeared. It was Admiral Harris, the commander of the Imperial fleet. Captain O'Connell, she said, her face stern. I've received your report. Your actions were commendable, but this victory comes with a warning. The Arcadia was not an isolated threat. There are others out there, others who have technology far beyond anything we've encountered. Connell's heart sank. He had feared this. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Admiral, what do you mean? He asked. Admiral Harris's expression grew even more serious. We've been monitoring the situation closely. There are rumors of other ships with similar capabilities, ships that can manipulate space and time. Ships that are not bound by the same laws we are. The Arcadia was just a test. Connell felt his blood run cold. A test. The Arcadia had been a trial, a demonstration of power, but there were more. And if the Arcadia was just the beginning, they were in for a fight unlike anything they had ever faced. How soon until we can get reinforcements? O'Connell asked. Reinforcements are en route, but it will take time, Admiral Harris replied. We've called in every available ship, but we can't predict when they'll arrive. You may be on your own for a while, O'Connell's jaw clenched. They would have to make do with what they had. They couldn't afford to wait. The Star Fortress was barely holding together, but they couldn't afford to stay idle. Not now. Not when the enemy was out there, ready to strike again. He turned to his crew. We'll make the necessary repairs, but we need to be ready to move at a moment's notice. We don't know what's out there, but I do know one thing. We're not going to back down. The crew nodded in unison. They had been through hell, and now they knew what lay ahead. The Arcadia was just the start. There were greater threats out there, more advanced ships, and it was only a matter of time before they encountered them. O'Connell looked at the view screen again. The debris from the Arcadia drifted in the distance, like a reminder of the challenge they had overcome. But it also served as a warning. There were other ships out there, ships with technology that could make the Arcadia look primitive by comparison. The fight for the galaxy was far from over. O'Connell turned away from the view screen and looked at his crew. They were ready. He could see it in their eyes. They were exhausted, yes, but they were also determined. They had fought against the Arcadia and won. They could do it again. And as long as they stood together, they would never back down. The crew of the Star Fortress was more than just a group of soldiers. They were a family, bound together by a common cause. And Captain O'Connell knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The galaxy was changing, but the Star Fortress and its crew would stand firm. They would fight for survival. They would fight for each other, and they would fight for the Empire. The war was just beginning, and O'Connell was ready for whatever came next.